Hello, folks. Good evening. Welcome to the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. My name is Isaac Zablocki. I'm Director of Film Programs here at the JCC. We'll just give us another minute to get settled and figure out your connections to the Zoom, and we'll start our conversation in just a moment. In the meantime, this is a good opportunity to share some of our upcoming programs that are coming to you soon. So we have still in our screening room, we still have the film Leona. If you haven't seen this, it's a wonderful Mexican film about a young Jewish woman and her problematic relationship with a non-Jewish man. Fabulous film, and we had the director here last week for a conversation, so you could watch that recorded on our YouTube channel. We also have in our screening room MC Escher, Journey to Infinity, about the artist Escher, who's one of my favorites, and it's a beautiful documentary. Coming up this next week, we're going to be starting Friday, the film Till Kingdom Come, which was part of our other Israel Film Festival. And that's going to be in full release, and we're excited to have that film back with us. And then finally, from March 8th till March 23rd, leading up to the elections, yet more elections in Israel, we're having a whole series of films on Israeli political leaders, from Ben Gurion to Bibi. All these wonderful documentaries that are made on some of the more juicier Israeli leaders, Golda, Lieberman, for those of you who follow Israeli politics closely, Menachem Begin, Ehud Olmert, we have the premiere of a film about him, and Dov Hanin. So please check those all out, and you can get a pass for all those films together. Now it gives me great pleasure to talk about tonight's film, The Vigil. This is, I think, the first, some say that some of the classic Jewish films were horror films and were in Yiddish, but not many have been told in color ever before. And we're really excited to have this very special, I guess, New York City premiere of The Vigil. The film is actually opening officially through IFC February 26th. That's this Friday. That it happens to be Purim, and we could discuss that too. You could check out all the information at thevigil.movie. I want to give a big thank you to IFC and, of course, to Tamar Simon from Mean Streets Management for making this event happen. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce we have here members of the cast and crew. And I'm going to start with the order of, ladies first. So we'll start with Malky Goldman. Malky, thank you so much for being here, and you'll be spotlighted to join us here, and she plays Sarah, of course. Then we have here Davy Davis, please. He plays Yaakov. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Keith Thomas is the director of the film. And Raphael Margules is the producer. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for this fabulous film. It's really, I have a lot to say about the film and the genre itself, but let's talk about you first. Maybe each of you could tell us a little bit about yourselves and how you got started with the film. And we'll go in the order that I introduced. So Malky, you're first.
Hi, thank you for having me and having us. I'm Malky Goldman, grew up in Jerusalem in an ultra-Orthodox family in Mea Shearim. And now I'm in New York. I've been living in Brooklyn for 10 years. How I got into this film? Well, I got really lucky, I think. I was in a different film with Lynn Cohen, and I met two of the producers from The Vigil, Raphael Margules and Danny Finkelman, and they were like, oh, we're involved in this other film that I think you would be really great. You should read the script. I read it, and then I was only praying to get the part. I did an audition for Keith, and then I was nervous throwing up for 2 months, and then I got the part. And then when I got the part, I was really lucky to also get to help out with the Yiddish and other consulting elements that was relating to the Hasidic community, which I come from.
Nice. Up next on my camera, Dave.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dave Davis, and I play Yaakov in The Vigil. And I did a movie a few years ago called Bomb City, and I was fortunate enough that Keith checked it out, and he reached out to me. He enjoyed the performance in that, and we talked about The Vigil, and he sent me the script, and I was blown away. It just seemed like such an incredible challenge as an actor, and such a complex story with so many different layers going on. It was just a really, really exciting prospect to be able to play Yaakov. And then in the following months, we just sort of dove into it and really had a great time exploring the world.
Very cool. Keith, you're the writer and director, but where did this all start for you?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know how I got here, really. I had a very kind of circuitous path to becoming a filmmaker. I have a background in education and clinical research, which I did for a long time. I had a number of careers, and then as a writer and a screenwriter, and then finally kind of was able to kind of convince myself that I could attempt to film, and made a short film, and that short film opened enough doors that I was able to kind of get people to look at my script for The Vigil. And it was through my manager that I met Rafi, who will talk next, and his partner JD, who happened to be both producers who make horror films and love horror films, and are also Orthodox Jews. And so it was kind of this, peanut butter and chocolate match in terms of who else is going to make a Jewish horror film. So, The Vigil, I think, it's a very personal film. It pulls from a lot of my life and a lot of my own experience. Like Dave, in some ways, I have a non-Jewish looking name, but I am Jewish, and my family's from New York, and they're from Brooklyn. In fact, my grandparents are from Flatbush. And it was, this was really a passion project that I was really excited that Rafi and JD believed in enough to make it a reality. And then I got amazing folks like Malky and Dave to be a part of it.
Amazing. Rafi.
Hello, hi, I'm Rafi from Long Island, New York, originally. Represent. I am a partner at a company called Boulder Light Pictures. Like Keith said, we primarily focus on genre movies. It's horror, thriller, sci-fi, action. When we got the call from Keith's manager about The Vigil, we were super excited because especially once we had spoken to him and realized that we wanted to make the same movie. We had never made a Jewish movie, period. I never thought I'd make Jewish movies. It's not something that was in the long-term plan. This came together super organically, and we're just really proud of how the movie came out. It's our most personal movie to date, and it was a nice intersection of the worlds that we operate in as horror producers and Orthodox Jews.
So before we get into the story of the film itself, let's talk about the filmmaking process a little bit. And I'm interested, first of all, you're making a film that, first of all, has Yiddish actors, has a lot of Yiddish script in it, and it's also the film itself really exists within the ultra-Orthodox community of Brooklyn. And I was wondering how easy that was to put together. How were those pieces just like waiting there for you? You had Dave and Malky there, and everybody who is familiar with the community, and it all comes together, or was this something that really had some challenges?
I mean, I would say it's interesting. It came together very quickly. By the time when Rafi and JD had read the first script, by the time we were on set, it was like 9 months, which is kind of very unlikely certainly for a first film, but for any film in general, it usually takes much longer. A lot of what is in the story was kind of in my first draft in terms of the approach to the faith and in this an enclosed sort of community. It wasn't set in Brooklyn originally. When I teamed up with Rafi and JD, we moved it to Brooklyn, which seemed to fit exactly. But you know, a lot of those ideas
scarier than Brooklyn, right?
It depends what hour of the day. But you know, it came together pretty organically. So a lot of that stuff was there. Obviously, I don't speak Yiddish. I wrote the script in English, and it was when we got on, when we started pre-production, when I met Malky and sat down with Menashe. So, like for example, with Menashe, I basically gave him the English dialogue, and we sat together and translated it together, because there are a lot of. It's interesting. You know, it was something that I hadn't done before, but. You know, with a lot of dialogue, there's certain expositional points, especially in a genre film, that you have to establish the kind of who, where, why, what, when of the rules of a horror film. And a lot of that dialogue was Menashe's. So it wasn't just, I needed him to say specific things, and some of them didn't translate into Yiddish, right? It just wasn't a one-on-one. So a lot of it was just us kind of feeling it out and figuring it out. And of course, once we're on set, it was kind of Malky standing right next to me as I'm listening to Dave and Menashe perform in Yiddish as she's translating, and you know, just take by take, we're figuring it out and making sure we're hitting what we need.
And I'd like to add, I take that as a great compliment, because I do not speak Yiddish. I have familial roots in New York, in Brooklyn, going back. But for me, that was part of the journey and the challenge of the performance, was diving into that dialect and diving into that character and the language.
And just to piggyback off that, once we knew we were making, like, this is the line I like to say, is once we talked to Keith and we said, we don't want to make a Jewish horror movie, we want to make the Jewish horror movie. The intention was, we're going full on Jewish. So like, we want this movie to feel authentic through and through, that it's not for the Orthodox community, it's for the horror community first and foremost, in terms of primary demographic. But if the Orthodox community, and that's any aspect of the Orthodox community, sees this movie, that they buy the entire thing, that there's no element of the movie that we're like, oh, that's ridiculous, that would never happen, or that doesn't make any sense. So it was really important for us. So when the characters would speak Yiddish, the actors are speaking Yiddish. And the set design has to be precise, and the mezuzahs are pointing in the right direction of what direction mezuzahs are supposed to point in. So we took that approach of authenticity with every decision that we made.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot too. With we didn't want it to be this kind of thing where the first scene is in Yiddish, and then from then on we just switched to English. It was like, if it would be in Yiddish, if he's talking to himself, we want it to be the way that he would speak to himself.
I want to add something about the set design. We went so far, and it was so refreshing to be in a set where every detail of the set is paid with as much passion, with like set design, language, authenticity to horror and to religiosity. But it went so detailed that we wouldn't hang two paintings of two rabbis that would not sit next to each other in a Hasidic home. So if it was a painting of the Lubavitcher rabbi, it would not be next to a Satmar rabbi. So we made sure that this is not happening, which happened, and we removed that. So everything was just down to the detail. And then my sister, who is religious, ultra-Orthodox, saw the film and she said, wow, that was amazing. She couldn't complain about anything. So mission accomplished.
Yeah.
It was actually going to be my next question. I was blown away by the authenticity of the film. And it really, I mean, it's clear that it's coming from a very rich culture. And that's what makes it, like, you know, the genre is very familiar. The setting was just so like, you know, filled with detail that and it felt like detail. I mean, I can't judge it, but I didn't know if, you know, this rabbi wouldn't sit next to that rabbi, but it's, I think it's one of the things that makes it makes it a really good sandwich. It's not just like, you know, you smear it a little bit on top. how did you make sure that you were I mean, is Malky, were you like, in charge of authenticity there and making sure that everything's pronounced correctly, rabbis are not sitting next to the wrong people?
Yeah, I was there. We had more consultants, and then it was also really nice. Rafi is so familiar with the Hasidic community. He has close by roots, so it something. I mean, I've been in other films that are trying to get the Hasidic community, and they are like, doesn't look right. That's all we care. We have to move on, next shot. Whereas in here it was like, is it authentic? Does it feel good? Would your grandmother do it? Besides this passion, it was also everyone was so familiar with the culture. So there's something about, even if you do take creative license, you have to know what you can take out. You have to know the culture enough. And I felt that in this film, there was enough people who really knew what's happening. So it was teamwork, and it really was paid attention to detail. And I have to say, Rafi, it's always the producers that are like, it doesn't matter, nobody cares. And you were there saying it matters. And that's, I think, 50%.
Thank you, Malky.
Yeah, that's
Really?
a real luxury.
Seriously, that was great.
Thank you. I just to add on that, it's a lot of stuff. A lot of times, cultures, religions, and ethnicities are portrayed from an outside perspective. So you have outsiders looking in, and in this case, we were insiders for the most part, or a lot of voice were. So that kind of allowed us to accomplish what we wanted to do.
Yeah, and then Keith would be like, if it was something that is super orthodox, Keith would be like, what how would it really be? It was really, everyone really wanted to know. And also, I feel like, Keith, I don't know if you know this, but you were Hasidic during your heart because the way you wrote the script already had so much warmth and Hasidicism inside of it. So it really, really was. I can't, there's so many people who are trying to get an authentic, genuine illusion of the community, and this one did achieve it.
I completely agree. I think, and I see all of these, and I'm often grossed out by the ones that feel inauthentic, and it doesn't take much to be able to tell that it's inauthentic. There's also the other version, which is the National Geographic version of it, where it's like an outsider coming in. While this one, and I give credit even to those who are not part of the community, it felt like a movie that was completely immersed in its culture that it was covering there. And I'm actually surprised to see that you are all not Hasidic, actually.
I do think it was really important to all of us to make sure that the respect was there and that there wasn't even an ounce of this that could even be construed as exploitational at all. It's a story about a person from a community told in the most honoring way possible, while still really at its core, it's a horror movie.
Yeah, I remember seeing, like, before we started shooting, a year before, I think, there's a famous Netflix documentary that I'm sure you're all familiar of that goes inside the community. I remember there was a shot in that documentary of like Hasidim standing near the river somewhere, and like ominous music was playing. And I'm just like, that's the opposite of what I want to do here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'll give a shout out here because I think the film also, in some ways, pays respect to Footsteps, which is an organization that we often partner with, and is a good partner, I would say, for this film in some ways, for people who are leaving the Orthodox community, to give them support systems as they enter what I'll call the real world. And definitely worth checking out Footsteps.org as a good partner for this. I was also going to ask, this one maybe is for Rafi to start, but the connection between Judaism and horror films. You mentioned that this is something that you've always wanted to produce. What is the connection? Is there a connection? Where does Judaism? Where do you find that connection between Judaism and horror?
For sure, I'll touch on this, and then I'm going to hand it over to Keith because I'm sure he'll have a more precise answer than I will. But to me, it's like there's never been a true Jewish horror film. That's what we always talked about, outside from that movie 100 years ago, The Golem. And to me, sadly, a lot of the reality as a Jew is dealing with so much generational trauma and persecution through the years, through pogroms and anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. And we tried to capture that in our movie. And so many so many of the great horror movies, from The Exorcist to The Babadook, are about battling your demons and battling trauma. So it's odd to me that there's never been a movie that has manifested that trauma, the Jewish trauma, in a horror film. But to me, it was very organic the way you would portray the history of the Jewish people through the lens of a horror movie. And then something we always like to talk about is that so many of the great horror movies have been directed by Jews, from William Friedkin doing The Exorcist, to Kubrick doing The Shining, to Polanski doing Rosemary's Baby, to today Ari Aster doing Hereditary. So I do find the genre to be pretty Jewish. Obviously, we've seen mostly the Catholic approach to horror, but hopefully this movie can change that. Keith, did you want to add anything?
I mean, I think you hit, all the right bases. I mean, in terms of just my own personal kind of approach to it, I've said this before, but it honestly, there is a mercenary side of it, in that I was looking for an in, right? It's my first film. I wanted to make something that would stand out, that felt different. And I realized that I had never seen a truly Jewish horror movie, a horror movie set in a truly Jewish world that comes from Jewish themes. And, it's still a horror movie and still has all the scares. And even if you're not Jewish, you can watch it and totally get it. But that if you were Jewish, you might be able to see more layers to it. And so once I realized that I hadn't seen that, I thought, wow, this is my opportunity. That's a great way in. And then once I started working on it, it was impossible for my own history and my own kind of personal, demons and inspirations to seep directly into it.
And this concept of the shomer being really the basis to all of this, where did that start for you?
So I actually studied at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, the rabbinical school, the Reform Rabbinical School in New York City. And I am not a rabbi, but I did a master's in education. And my master's thesis was on monsters in the Torah. So it was just very fitting. I've always been a kind of a horror fan. And of course, when I ended up doing my master's, that's what it was about. And during that sort of exploration, I got interested in demons, and which seemed a very strange thing to me initially, that there were even Jewish demons or a belief in demons. And it just seemed natural to tie that in with the shomer. The shomer sort of role is one that is obviously a wonderful setup for a horror film, being alone with a dead body. Mm-hmm. How do you do that and not make it crass? How do you not exploit that? Because it is actually a beautiful thing. And I've never been a shomer in the traditional sense. But I know a lot of people who have, and I've, read interviews with folks who've done it in the community as paid shomers. So once I kind of figured that stuff out, I thought this is an interesting way into an excellent horror film setup, Alone with a Body, 5 hours in a crazy home with something. But then taking that rather kind of base idea and trying to elevate it with, well, how do we explore bigger themes kind of within this sort of setup?
Fabulous. And Dave, were you, in order to get into character, did you have to experience being a shomer for a night, or how did you research that side of the role?
I didn't. I did not play the role in real life of a shomer, but Keith and I talked a lot about it, and he told me a really interesting story where he overheard someone say how disrespectful it was that a shomer had deserted their duty and run out of the house, and what could make someone feel that fear. And in preparing for the role, I met as many people from the community as I could, and I tried to learn as much about their upbringing and their family life and about the way that they approach the secular world as they're starting to enter it. And once we kind of had built that foundation, and I felt like I was starting to sort of understand where Yaakov came from, then for me, it was really more a matter of exploring the sort of battles that a lot of us face and a lot of the people we love face, such as mental health struggles, struggles with faith, struggles with feeling alone, struggles with feeling lost in the world and confused. And so in that way, it was a community that was very new to me and very foreign to me in a lot of ways. But once I really was able to dig into it, then I realized how much we really all have in common.
Nice. I do want to, I know there's a couple questions from the audience, and I do want to take questions from the audience. Folks, if you have questions, put them in the chat and we'll open your mic and allow you to ask them live. But before that, I had at least one more question. I could go on for a while, but I wanted to know about how non-Jewish audiences have been responding to this film, and how it speaks universally, and have we created more anti-Semites? I'm just kidding, but has this played for other audiences, mainstream?
Yeah, I can start with that. Rafi and I can both talk to that. It's played well. We opened at the Toronto International Film Festival. We had our premiere there in 2019, and it was a Midnight Madness crowd, which sounds exactly what it's like, a Midnight Madness. And they really seemed to love it. And I would say the majority of the people there were not Jewish. Dave and I were in Sitges in Spain, where the movie played, and it was great to see just the curiosity around the movie and the kind of the interest there. And I was at the premiere in France as well, where, each of these cultures have very different sorts of, these cultures, these countries have very different histories with both anti-Semitism and Jews today. So it was just fascinating from that angle. But for, I think, Rafi and I, the one thing we were going for from the beginning was, is it scary? Is it a horror film the way we wanted it to be a horror film? And with somebody who, loves horror and loves all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies or whatever, would they like this too? Can they get into this? And the response has been very good. They have. And a lot of I think a lot of the horror critics and horror fans who are maybe public that we look up to, like other horror filmmakers, they've had very positive things to say, which I think make us feel great.
That's great.
Yeah, it's been really wonderful to see. I mean, from the beginning, Keith and I always talked about it. We want this to be an accessible film. We want, even though we're doing this movie that's going to end up being 50% in Yiddish and in a community you don't generally see in this genre, that you've never seen in this genre, we want regular audiences, especially in the horror audience, to be able to access the movie and find it to be commercial and mainstream in that way. So that was the intention. And structurally, obviously the film is doing its own thing and it's super unique, but structurally we wanted it to be mainstream. And I think that we accomplished that. And it's been nice to see that even on an emotional level, it's been emotional. We always wanted to make an emotional film. And I think certainly for a lot of secular and Orthodox Jews, they do find points of the movie to be really emotional. But it's been nice to see that totally non-Jewish, non-American audiences have reacted emotionally to the film as well. It's a really relatable international story. So it's been great.
I want to say it's also, even though it's about such a niche, it's really produced with such high quality that it feels like a very universal film that, won't stand out. I mean, often you'll find films about a niche kind of, being not shot as perfectly. And I felt this one really came together. And I think a lot of it is also credit to, beyond the directing, of course, to the acting, and Malky and Dave, of course, both of you are fantastic. And you mentioned Menashe, who was in that film Menashe that was extremely popular, I think about 2 summers ago. And it was good to see him back on the screen and actually acting again. But of course, you had Fred Melamed, who is just like, one of my favorite character actors who out there, and that voice, is just really something else. I heard his voice. I think I heard his voice before I saw him, and I was like, maybe I was just listening, but I was like, I know who that is.
Fred's the first person we went out to, and he was the first person we wanted, and we're so happy he said yes. It was so fun being in the
fun to record that with him.
Sound studio with this guy, with Cy Abelman from A Serious Man coming in. So it was so fun.
He is great. And then, of course, you had the amazing Lynn Cohen, who sadly passed away a year ago or around this time. And she, of course, played Golda and has had an amazing career. How did Lynn come about?
Yeah, Lynn came into it through one of our producers, Adam, who is Rafi's cousin, who has worked with Malky and Lynn on previous films. In fact, Adam was a producer of the film Menashe, so it's all kind of this incestuous thing in terms of how everyone got there. But Lynn read the script, was really interested, and when she showed up, right, she was just this powerhouse of more than 50 years of experience in making films and doing theater. Lynn really kind of had a very personal approach to this movie, despite the fact that it's a horror film and not exactly the kind of thing that she was used to being in or, seeing. It was personal to her. She had lost family in the Holocaust. She had lost family to pogroms. And the accent she's using, the voice of Ms. Litvak, is her grandmother's voice. It is her own, I believe, Ukrainian grandmother that she's kind of channeling there. And so it was a powerful thing for her. And I will say also, she had a lot of fun in that, when you first meet Ms. Litvak, and you obviously know she has some dementia and stuff, but it's a creepy house and she's like a creepy old lady. I think Lynn had a lot of fun playing the creepy old lady. She liked scaring Dave and kind of getting into that.
She was such a powerhouse. And I watched the movie again a couple nights ago, and I hadn't seen it in a while. And I hadn't seen it since she passed away. And I was so shocked by how fragile and small she looked, because in my memory, she was like so larger than life.
Really, it's like an honor to have her in that role and to really show what an amazing actress she is. I'd love to take a couple questions from the audience, and we're going to start with Larry. Larry, you're on the line.
I really enjoyed the film, even though I'm not particularly a horror aficionado, but thank you. I had a bunch of questions, but I understand I only get to ask one or two. So here's one simple one. I think of a Litvak as, I know there's Lithuanian Hasidim, but I think of a Litvak as a anti-Hasid. So why did you name Ruben Litvak?
So I'll start with this one, and I'm going to hand it off to Rafi. So honestly, when I wrote the script, I just liked the sound of the name Litvak. I just liked it. It had both an ominous sort of thing to it. It's just the sound, the actual sound of the name. It wasn't until I got into pre-production that Rafi kind of pulled me aside and said, okay, let's talk about this Litvak thing since we're here. So Rafi, you want to go into that?
I wish I can give you a thematically rich answer as to why the characters, the people who live in that house, are named the Litvaks. I don't. I remember Keith just saying, I really like the sharpness of the name. But I'm sure that somebody will write a think piece on it, and then we'll understand why we made that decision.
I don't think
Malky,
you're giving yourself
too.
enough credit. I remember a lot of discussion around that.
Yeah, I can defend it though. There's always this outsider, the weirdo, that Hasidim would like to call a Litvak just to exclude him from their own. So maybe that was the case. Who knows?
See there, that's the answer.
I don't even necessarily see the Litvaks as being Hasidish necessarily either.
They're not Hasidish.
Yeah.
They're not, the opposite. So,
The Litvak family is Hasidish.
Yeah, I think he wasn't a Litvak after all. They just did not want to include him into the Hasidim. So they are like, oh, he's a Litvak. And that became his nickname.
Oh, there you go. Maybe that's the answer. Yeah. Great question, though.
Larry, good question. So you get to ask one more.
Okay. Well, this is a little more generic, but could you talk about the music and the composer a little? It seemed to me like the music was, it followed all the horror movie tropes of rising up to a crescendo when you're about to have a scary or a shocking moment. On the other hand, the music didn't seem, I don't know, Jewish particularly. I imagine that was your intent, but maybe comment on that.
Yeah, so that was my intent initially. The composer's Michael Yezerski. an Australian Jew who's composed, for a lot of film and TV. And I knew going into it that I needed the score to kind of do two things. One, I needed it to kind of merge as much as it could into the sound design, because it's a very contained film, and given our budget, sound is just so important in horror films. It's just crucial. If you've ever watched a horror film with your ears plugged, you'll know that like 50% of the scare is gone because it's the sound. So it was both combining those sound design elements in terms of making that house much bigger than it felt, with a score that was both propulsive, that hit kind of the horror crescendos that you're talking about, while at the same time felt different. So for me, even though the film is set essentially within the Hasidic community, I did not want music that sounded traditionally Jewish or Hasidish in any way. I wanted to sound modern because that is what Yaakov is attempting to become. Yaakov has left. He has a cell phone. He's trying to listen to music that feels a part of the secular world. He's trying to be modern in that sense. There's also a certain, having lived in New York and spent a lot of time in Brooklyn, and being a fan of industrial music, there's a very sort of industrial sound to the city. It's all the metal and the stone and the grinding. And I wanted to incorporate that as well. And so luckily, Yezierski was very much in tune with that same genre of music and style of music. And what's interesting is he took a lot of Jewish instrumentation and instruments like violins and things, and he heavily distorted them. So weirdly enough, they're just heavily distorted through other sounds, to kind of accomplish this sort of both otherworldly or haunting sort of sound with an aggressive sort of, again, the horror kind of aspect of it, noise.
And yeah, just to talk about that a little bit, one of my favorite parts about the movie, it's my favorite shot in the movie, it's probably my favorite moment in the movie, is when Yaakov is sitting at the dining room table and the camera's in front of him, and the body's behind him, and we just sit there for a few minutes waiting for something to happen. It's very suspenseful. But just the contrast between this techno music and the body in the background, to me, is just it's such an assault on the senses. It's like, it doesn't make sense. Or like, that image shouldn't match this music. And I think it's like disorienting in this really fun way. But then we do end the movie with a song, a very Jewish song by the band Zusha, which was fun.
I remember that. Let me bring on our next question from Ariel. Ariel, you're on.
Hi, so I'm actually a huge genre fanatic, and I love this film for actually bringing all of the issues of Jewish identity into the genre I love. And I wanted to ask a little bit about the forms that the monster takes and how you decided upon where you were going to make the incarnations explicit versus suggestive. And if you wanted to comment on at all, like where you decided what the different incarnations were going to be.
Yeah, so our Mazik, our monster in this film, I knew when I sat down to write the film that like whatever it was that it was connected to Mr. Litvak's body, I didn't want it to be something we'd seen before. I didn't want a Dybbuk because there'd been, even A Serious Man opens with a Dybbuk. There's a lot of Dybbuks around, and Dybbuks are evil spirits, which felt a little different than a demon for me. And so once I kind of dug into the Shadim and kind of ideas, that's how I found the Mazik. The Mazik, however, has absolutely zero description in any of the rabbinic literature. You can find some 2,000-year-old text talking about a Mazik in a house, and don't go in the house because there's a Mazik, but it doesn't describe it at all. It's essentially invisible. And so I had to kind of create this entity entirely kind of from whole cloth. And for me, it was important because the Mazik, what it's doing is essentially, if we want to get into the nitty gritty of like the life and times of a Mazik, it's essentially this, it is born between the days of creation. It is a spark of life without a soul or a form. And it is a parasite. It's feeding on emotion, in particular, negative emotion. And it has been feeding on Jews. Who knows when it kind of came to find them, but it's been feeding on the pain of Jews for millennia. And the forms that it takes are forms that will either induce fear or pain and try to bring those out. The core concept behind the Mazik was this idea of never being able to stop looking into the past, to stop looking at your pain. And so the idea was I wanted a boogeyman that felt like an actual thing, not like a big tentacular Cthulhu monster, but like something that felt real, like a man standing in your corner in the, in the shadows. That was spooky. That was frightening. And what if that guy's head was turned around backwards? What would that look like if he was always staring into the past? And even more so, what it would look like if his face turned to look at you. Could you stand that? Could you handle it if it turned around? So that was the core Mazik. That was the thing. That's what it looked like. And then the different forms it took were essentially memories that it was pulling, that it had fed upon. So some of the forms it took were memories that Mr. Litvak had, the corpse, including in the basement sequence where he turns around and sees, essentially it looks like a little boy. You're really just seeing the hands, but it's a little boy in 18th century clothes with his head turned backwards is what that is. For Yaakov, when he goes into the hallway, it is his brother. He's seeing his dead brother with the head backwards. He's seeing Mr. Litvak. It's trying to induce the trauma by pulling on these different forms. So that was essentially it. It's like a memory monster that won't let your memories lie.
So spooky. Really, I have the chills just from this conversation. We're going to take one more comment. Lauren, you had something to share.
Oh, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Lauren Klass-Schneider, and when I was 12 in St. Louis, Missouri, I looked through what the JCC offerings were for kids that might like drama, and there was an improv class taught by a woman named Lynn Cohen. Mm-hmm. And from the time I was 12, Lynn was a teacher of mine starting at the JCC in St. Louis. And her attraction to the work that you guys did on this film was so visceral and came not from the genre, but from the fact that there was quality work and it was quality writing and quality characters created to tell a story. And it just happened to be a horror film, a suspense film, but that's not what her attraction was. And I was lucky enough for her to be my teacher, really starting at the JCC in St. Louis at 12, all the way through the time she died.
Oh, that's so great. It's great to hear that. Well, thank you. And I really appreciate hearing that. You know, like we said, Lynn was just really amazing. And I don't think I've ever shared this story, at least, publicly outside of the production. But there was a night when we wrapped shooting. We were filming it was mostly nights, which is already hard enough. And when you're 86, it's particularly difficult. But Lynn had just so much energy. It was unbelievable. I left set. We probably wrapped. That was one of our early nights. We wrapped around 1 a.m, somewhere around there. And I took my 30-minute whatever train back to my apartment, the one that I was staying in, and got ready, went to bed. And at like 3 a.m, my phone rang and I answered it, and it was Lynn. And Lynn was up and she was like, I've just been thinking about what we did tonight and kind of the performance. And if you're game for it, I want to try to do something a little different in this scene, because I wasn't as satisfied with what I did. And it was incredible. 3 a.m, she's still thinking about it and getting ready. I said, look, Lynn, it's amazing. I think you did great as it was, but for sure, let's try it. So it's just her commitment to just being as, authentic to this character, every character she played. And she was able to step into those shoes. But it wasn't so much like, I'm going to put this mask on, I'm going to do the performance, and I'm moving on to the next thing. It was like, I'm 100% in this, and I'm going to be in this. And there's, I'm not leaving until I get it right, which, is amazing. I should, I'm going to also shout out, we have an actor in the film who's here on the on the live stream, which is Dunn Lasky. I see you there, Dunn. Hello, Dunn. Dunn plays the guy, the young Mr. Litvak, who has to shoot the woman in the harrowing opening sequence.
Where you going, Don? Where you driving?
Don, you can unmute carefully.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I just had to take a little trip right at this time. But I'm happy to, that's what's good about the Zoom, that we can all get in on this. It was more than amazing to play young Ruben, and me watching it afterwards was just, I know I'm there and I know I'm acting, but it just was more than amazing, and not just what I played, but seeing the rest of it and seeing it was gave me, you can't breathe the entire time, which is even from watching myself, and it was more than great experience.
Thanks for being here, Don, and please focus on the road.
Really good to meet you, Don.
I'm focusing.
So the film is opening officially Friday, and again, please share the information. Where can people see the film, and why is it significant to Purim?
Rafi, that's your producer role.
It's another tough question. So the film is being released this Friday, the 26th, on Purim, in theaters and on demand. On demand means anywhere and everywhere that you rent movies. That means Amazon. That means Apple TV/iTunes. That means Google Play, Vudu, anywhere that you rent movies, renting through on demand through your cable box, like Comcast or whatever it is in New York. I forget what it is in New York. Cable. I forget what the cable box in New York is. Anyways, anywhere and everywhere on demand, and in theaters where open and safe, which is not New York City just yet. But please share this information within your own respective Jewish communities. It's so exciting that so many people from the Jewish community are going to be seeing their first horror movie and hopefully liking it. So please spread it within the Jewish community. And again, with Purim, I wish I had a great answer, but it's a Jewish holiday and this is a Jewish film.
Purim is featured in the film.
Purim is featured in the film. That's a great, Purim, it's very subtle, but Purim is in the flashbacks where we see Dave in full Hasidic wardrobe, where he experiences the tragedy with his brother. That is, the idea was that is Purim. And if you watch it again, I don't know if it comes across, if you watch it again, you'll notice that Yaakov's younger brother is wearing has a construction outfit on, and Yaakov's also acting super silly. He's very clearly pretty tipsy or drunk. So there you go.
And I love it that Purim is often compared to Halloween. Halloween being the most popular release date for horror films. Makes sense. Jewish horror film, Purim.
So, perfect answers.
That's where I thought you were going. I want to give a big thank you again to IFC Films for giving us this film, and Tamar Simon from Mean Streets Management. Folks, please do spread the word, get the word out there. I'd love it for the whole Orthodox community to see this, but I think it even can go way beyond and speak pretty broadly. And I know everybody's a fan now of unorthodox, and I think there's a lot to connect here.
Thank you so much for giving us a platform, for hosting us and having us. It's really such a pleasure.
A pleasure. I want to thank you all, Malky, Dave, Rafi, and Keith. Thank you so much for being here, and all of you for being a part of this conversation and joining in tonight. Thank you so much, folks. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon at other events. Please join us for ongoing events here at the JCC. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy Purim,
Thank you so
everyone.
much for having us.
Bye.